I moved out on my own just a few months ago. My house is in a pretty decent neighborhood, and at 25 going on 26, I'm doing pretty good in career-wise. Socially, however, I am lacking. Yes, I had friends back where I used to live, but after high school and college, everyone just kind of went their separate ways, which is understandable. Being a high-functioning autistic person, it's kind of hard for me to meet new people. Especially when your autism makes you even picking up a phone to call your friends seem like a chore. I did manage to take one friend with me, my best friend and my roommate, Nynx. She is the cutest black cat you could ever see, and my dad found her for me about 15 years ago when she was just a kitten. We lived together in this two-story house for about 2 or 3 months now. It was the night before Halloween, and I was carving a pumpkin for a jack-o'-lantern. This would be my first Halloween alone, but my parents were coming up for my birthday on the 2nd of November. I was pretty congested. It was bad enough that I called out of work, which I don't often do so. Still, I wanted to be a nice guy and try to give out the candy. Hell, I still need to socialize at least a bit. Who knew? Maybe one of the neighbors would be a nice lady my age? I shrugged cynically, knowing my luck. Even if there were, I would hardly talk to any of these people. I finished my jack-o'-lantern while listening to some gothic music to set the mood, all while sniffling and trying to pop my ears. I had made a career out of my artistic skills. Luckily, this does not apply to jack-o'-lanterns though. Sadly, the finished product of my pumpkin carving, which broke the carving knives and serrated kitchen knife to finish. It took a disfigured demon with a facial tic. I was still both amused and slightly disturbed at my clumsiness, yes, as my clumsy hands had created, but still satisfied enough to keep it. The next night went pretty well, save for my now low congested throat and chest and sinus pressure. I had received plenty of reactions to my jack-o'-lantern, ranging from laughs to slight recoils of terror. As the evening went by, the trick-or-treaters became more and more disturbed. At the end of the night, I have found out why. I looked at the pumpkin, and what started out looking like an abomination had shriveled into something what literally looked like a twisted skull. I coughed and chuckled, feeling somewhat sympathetic towards it. I felt like I wanted to shrivel up too. I woke up probably about noon the next day, feeling even worse than last night. I was dizzy as hell and I couldn't breathe, and I almost completely deaf. My ears rang, and felt as if I would explode. I didn't want to get up, and had no reason to, but I did anyway. At least I wanted to check the mail, or get something to eat, or maybe take some congestant. As I stumbled downstairs and shuffled outside in my robe and my slippers to get to the mail, I noticed that my pumpkin had vanished. I already planned it on throwing it out anyway, but I was still unmidly surprised that was just gone. Someone might have just took it, stolen it, or either late last night or early this morning. I didn't care. I'm sick, and nor they did me a favor either way. I went inside with the mail, and I thought very little of it. I had myself a bowl of chicken noodle soup and a Coke as I took my meds, then shuffled upstairs to lie in bed and watch TV in my room. As crappy as I felt, I didn't like to do anything else. I woke up at around 8:36. By what my clock told me, my TV was still playing. I felt even more so dead to the world and could barely lift my head. When I finally managed to do so, I saw Nynx curled up by my feet. It was such a precious sight when my hoarse voice said, "Hi, Nynxie." She didn't respond. She must have fallen asleep. I reached to pet her when I felt her body, stiff and cold. She didn't move. Oh God, she was dead. My best friend of 15 years died beside me while I slept. My hands shook and I immediately began to weep. I weep continuously, and my head feeling and unable to hear my own sobs through my clogged ears. Even worse, my sobs were interrupted by the worsening of coughing fits. How could this happen to me? And on the day before my birthday, no less. I sobbed and coughed bitterly when the irony hit me on my birthday was known as the Hispanic Day of the Dead. Happy birthday to me? Fuck my life. Around midnight I finally stood up. Although teetering, and took my cat's lifeless body downstairs and got a shovel out of my garage. I went to the backyard and dug a hole next to my room window. I placed a stone where I had buried her to mark her grave, in memory of the best friend I ever had. I dizzily walked back to my house in the mix of soft subs, sniffles, and coughs. I thought about how this is probably a sign that I need to get out and socialize more. Fuck my autism. My dad's right. I need friends. My thoughts were interrupted when I got to the front porch and noticed that the pumpkin was sitting there in the darkness. I almost mistook it for the jack-o'-lantern I thought I had been taken, but when I got closer, I noticed the light inside was red, almost like a LED light inside it, and the pumpkin was black as the night. A face, a cat's face, was carved into this black pumpkin. What psychopath would do this to me? Was I being mocked? Who the hell was watching me? To know what I had just buried my cat and made a frickin' effigy of her pumpkin? I screamed in the mixture of rage and grief as I hurled the pumpkin onto the street in front of my house, dashing it to pieces and watching the red lights disperse. I then stumbled inside, feeling even sicker than before. I woke up 3 hours later, face down on my couch. By this, I mean, my face was literally at the seat of the couch, and the rest of me was on the floor. I half collapsed in the mixture of all the grief, confusion, anger, and sickness. I had attempted to stand up and walk, but after making it to my recliner, I collapsed again. At this point, I was so dead to the world that I couldn't hear at all. The cold mix between the hollowed out feeling of losing Ninx made it almost impossible to feel anything. I wanted to go to sleep forever, knowing that it was probably stupid of me, and feeling the inability to actually go to sleep. I decided to see what was on TV. I picked up the remote from downstairs on the TV and clicked on it. I clicked on the remote again. What the hell? I thought out loud. I saw the LED on the remote came on. Why wasn't the TV come on? Don't tell me it's dead too. I just bought the damn thing. For the first time today, I felt that something was off rather than grief, and strangely I welcomed it. My frustration turned into slight amusement when I considered the thought that I might actually find another pumpkin on my porch, this time for my TV. Out of my sheer curiosity, I decided to actually walk outside to check, and slowly and carefully stood up to counteract with the light, headed for the feeling I had shuffled onto the door. Sure enough, as soon as I opened the door, I saw a different shaped and colored pumpkin than before. I laughed my ass off, even as screwed up as I felt. I laughed and threw my coughing fits. Whoever psychopath was leaving the pumpkins of who died on my porch, they sure had a sense of humor. I think my head cold gave me a little delirious, because the situation could have been more unnerving. Out of all the things considered, after I stood back up from cackling hoarsely and coughing, I noticed the pumpkin's skin color. It wasn't a color I normally saw in the pumpkin. It had a fleshly olive color to it. My stomach sank when I looked down at my arm back to the pumpkin. It was my skin tone. I panicked, and the next thing I remember, I was in front of the pumpkin as if it just appeared there. The pumpkin was unlit, and with it being 3 a.m., I could barely make out what it was. Suddenly, inside of the jack-o'-lantern lit up, revealing to me what dreaded to see. It was my face. Oh no. Oh hell no. These pumpkins weren't made of markers who died. They were warnings. Some serial killer must have made markings of his targets with jack-o'-lanterns or something. Shit! Panicking, I bolted inside. More like floated, actually, as dizzy I felt. I started upstairs to my bedroom and get my ninja sword from under my pillow. This asshole wasn't going to take me down without a fight. As I got about halfway up the stairs, the realization hit me. If this jack-o'-lantern killer had killed Ninx, how would it make it look like she died of natural causes? I got my answer as I rounded the corner and entered my room. I saw Ninx, curled up on my bed as I found her earlier, as if I hadn't buried her, lying next to my limp body. I can't tell if I was horrified or stunned, pretty much at the surreal nature of what I had just seen. But out of my reflex, I gasped. This has sent me into a coughing fit, worse than the previous ones. I coughed as my lungs were trying to come up. My head pounded as I whooped and hacked. and I collapsed on the floor as my vision blurred and then it narrowed. The obituary read, Leonard Timothy Schmidt, November 2nd, 1986. November 2nd, 2012. After 2 agonizing days of being bedridden with the temperatures above 100 degrees, Leonard has succumbed to his birth on his 26th birthday at 3:33 a.m. His father and mother, who had came to visit, found him lifeless on his bed this morning. He was lying with his beloved feline Nynx. Forsenens concluded that after 15 long years, she died of old age, curled up right next to her best friend, merely hours prior.